So we're driving through bumper-to-bumper traffic for some reason on a Saturday afternoon, a 56-degree Saturday afternoon in the middle of May, which is how you know we're in Southeast Michigan, because it's not even 60 in the middle of May. And we want to show you something, which is essentially the difference between the Tesla AutoPilot and the Ford BlueCruise, or adaptive cruise control and lane centering and lane keeping. So those three things put together make up the current state of the Ford self-driving package. Adaptive cruise control, which does what you see right now, where you set a speed. In this case, it's set to 90, which is that number right there in the circle. And the cruise control will essentially do its best to reach and maintain that speed for as long as possible, consistent with the level of traffic that you're in. And right now we're in 5-mile-an-hour traffic. And so both the Ford and the Tesla have that adaptive cruise control. The second feature is called lane keeping, and then the third is called lane centering. And Ford treats those as two distinct features. And lane keeping, just so people know, is the system that will either warn you or actually intervene when you're getting too close to the edge of the lane, and it'll get on the steering in some cases to keep you from going out of your lane. The third one is called lane centering, and that does exactly what it sounds like, which is it keeps the vehicle centered in the lane. So now we need to actually turn off autopilot to let this emergency vehicle get past us. And then once it decides that we are, there we go. It can actually turn on from not a standing start, but from a very low speed. And so both the Tesla and the Ford can bring you to a complete stop, if that's what's happening with the traffic. And so they're not that different. The major differences are, again, that the Tesla calls itself AutoPilot, and it can do things like change lanes for you if you get on the blinker. All you have to do is get on the blinker, and if it decides there's a space that you can, there's space next to you, it'll actually do a lane change. The Ford doesn't do the lane change. The other thing that they both do, again, is keep you centered pretty well between the dividers when you're on something like an interstate. And the Tesla can do it. They can both do it in non-interstates as well, secondary roads, divided highways, non-divided highways, 2-lane roads. They can both do a really, really good of detecting and keeping you in between those lane dividers. The thing that the Tesla does a lot better than the Ford, though, is when you're in heavy traffic like we are now, and maybe it picks up from a stop, and you start moving and you're going 10, 20, 30 miles an hour, and then suddenly the traffic in front of you comes to a complete stop. The Tesla can pick up on that very quickly and very reliably, and it'll slow you down much more effectively than the Ford, which just always seems like it's a little bit behind the curve, and it's always getting surprised when traffic slows down suddenly in front of you, and then it waits too long and it ends up slamming on the brakes. Or it doesn't even do that, and you have to jump in there and manually get on the brakes, and that's just a little bit annoying. It's somewhat disconcerting, because it sits there and it makes you sit there and second guess whether or not the vehicle is actually going to do the right thing. And then at the last minute, when it doesn't, you have to get in there and manually jump on the brakes. And that takes away a very good amount, a very healthy amount of your comfort or driving satisfaction, or whatever you want to call it. The Tesla, you don't have to worry about the Tesla, because the Tesla is just on the job, and it'll start you from a complete stop. It'll get you up to whatever speed you set, 90 miles an hour, 80, 60, And if the traffic in front of you slows down all of a sudden, as you see there, the vehicle that we're following is in blue. The Tesla does a really good job of detecting and reacting to the vehicle that's two vehicles ahead of you. And the Ford doesn't really do that. It gains and maintains contact with that single vehicle ahead of you, and it doesn't really, I don't know if it even tries to find the one that's two vehicles ahead of you, which is a surprise because with so much more height above the ground, you'd think the Ford would be able to see further down the road and do a better job of looking deeper into the traffic, but it just doesn't do that. The Tesla does. And because of that fact, when something happens two vehicles ahead of you, the Tesla can react to it. And there are all these videos that you'll see, these YouTube videos of, you know, on the Autobahn, somebody wipes out three vehicles ahead of the car, and before the driver even knows what's going on, the car has already either gotten on the brakes or made an emergency lane change to get around or prevent getting tangled up in that accident. And so that's an area where the Tesla is head and shoulders above the Ford. Now we are counting on Ford taking all the data and all the information that's being sent back to it from all the vehicles that have these driver assistance features now, including the 2021 F-150 and a number of other vehicles. The Mustang Mach-E as well as the F-150, starting, we think in July, they said the third quarter, are going to have this feature called BlueCruise, where it specifically registers, I think they said 100,000 miles of U.S. interstates. And it can give you complete hands-free driving, and we're not really so excited about that because we just don't trust a vehicle with our life and with the lives of our family and to drive itself hands-free completely perfectly through any type of traffic and any type of weather and any type of road conditions. We are not so lazy that it's too much of an effort for us to keep our hands on the wheel. And so we're not going to run out there and jump on the BlueCruise bandwagon. We don't really feel any need to. The driver assistance feature that the Ford has, again, adaptive cruise control, lane keeping, and lane centering, those three put together are good enough. You do not have any need for hands-free driving if you've got those three features already. Now, I'm going to mention one other thing that the Ford has that the Tesla doesn't, and that gets you into trouble every now and then with the Tesla. The Tesla will not let you set, and I'm going to do it right now, 50, 60, 80, 90. The Tesla will not let you set or maintain a speed over 90 miles an hour with autopilot. Either AP1, which we have, which is autopilot version 1, that was in the 2015 and 2016 Model S, or AP2, which is the improved version that came out, we think, starting in 17, in the S as well as the X. Can't remember when the X came out, but it was definitely out in 2017. And then when the Model 3 came out, which was around 2018 or 19, I think it started with AP2, and then they might be up to AP 2.5. But none of those will let you set or maintain either cruise control or autopilot above 90 miles an hour. And if you've got it set, if you've got autopilot engaged, and you need to get on the gas or the throttle to go around somebody or to maneuver, you know, around some tricky traffic, autopilot will immediately disengage. And we've showed it before, and it'll give you a big red stop sign on the screen and a bunch of indicators, a bunch of sounds, a bunch of warning sounds. And not only will it disengage, but it won't come back on until you stop and put the vehicle in park, because it's trying to punish you for what it considers to be excessive speed. And some people would argue, yeah, it is excessive to go above 90, but we've been in a ton of situations where you have to get around traffic, and sometimes it's necessary to go above 90 to do that. And so that's one drawback of autopilot. It cuts out at 90, and it will not let you go any faster than 90, and then it will punish you if you do. If you like manually get on the gas like we just did and accelerate past 90 miles an hour. The other thing that the Ford does, which the Ford does a little bit better than the Tesla, is that if you're driving with autopilot engaged in a Tesla, and say the 18-wheeler next to you is getting a little bit too close, and you want to kind of move over a little bit, you know, to get a little bit further to either side of the lane, the Tesla doesn't really like you doing that. It'll let you do it to a very, very minor extent, and then it will it'll disengage. And I think we can get it to do it now. So if you notice, you move the wheel a little bit, it's kind of resisting, and then it just disengaged. And so it doesn't let you move that much, either to the left or the right inside the lane, when you've got autopilot engaged. All right, and lets you re-engage even in a stop, and that's fine. And the Ford is a lot more forgiving in that sense. It'll let you move it much further to the left or right if you think you need to get out of the way of a vehicle that's starting to drift towards you in a way that you don't feel is safe. And then when you finally get to the edge of the lane, yeah, the Ford will eventually disengage, but it's going to give you all kinds of feedback. It's going to like shake the wheel and that kind of thing. And so in that sense, the Ford gives you a little more flexibility. But what it doesn't do is what the Tesla does, which is give you those audible indicators. And so there are a lot of times when you're driving the Ford and lane centering or lane keeping or cruise will disengage and you don't know it. And then you look down and you're like, damn, it's not engaged. So unlike the Tesla, which has, you know, the indicators that you see there, usually there's a blue stripe to the left or right of the lane to indicate that autopilot's on. The Ford has like a little halo around the truck, the little picture of the truck. And it will disengage and won't tell you, it won't give you any audible indications that it's disengaged, and you'll think it's working, and then all of a sudden you'll find out the hard way that it isn't. And so that will trip you up sometimes. The Tesla, no. If it's engaged, you'll know it, because it'll make that two-tone sound, and then when it disengages, you will also know it. So notice, again, the Tesla does a great job as the traffic starts to move, of starting to move with it, and then getting to whatever interval you set. You use this little dial here on the cruise control stalk to adjust the interval, and it goes from 1 all the way to 7. 7 is the farthest, and then 1. And we're not sure exactly what that number represents, but you can adjust it. It looks like we might be next to the new, not sure what that is. But the Tesla, again, it does a great job of staying with the traffic and not opening it too much of a gap to the point where the vehicle next to you, if it wants to be a jerk, might just cut in. If you think it's starting to open up a gap like that, so for instance, we're next to a BMW, and they like to cut people off, even here in the Midwest, you know, where the drivers are a little more polite. If you think it's opening up too much of a gap, you can get on the throttle, close up the gap, and then the car will, as soon as you let off, did you notice how fast it stopped? The car will immediately get on the brakes, as it just did, and try to resume the interval to the greatest extent possible without actually going into reverse. It's not going to do that. And then the Ford, again, in conditions just like this, in stop and go traffic, it's a little bit slower on the draw in terms of picking up its speed, and then much slower in terms of recognizing that traffic is stopped and then getting onto the brakes and slowing down to the point where, you know, in the Tesla, we got no issues right now. We don't have a care in the world in terms of this driving. In the Ford, you're always paying attention and always keeping in the back of your mind that, yeah, this traffic might slow down suddenly, and then we're going to have to jam on the brake because the vehicle isn't going to pick up on it. All right, I think that's enough for now. Thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great afternoon. Talk to you later.